Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis.
I'm Mike Mateen. Very
Tonight.
loud. I don't know
Uh-oh.
how to.
Well, that sounds like a personal problem. I don't know. So anyway, we're here tonight to talk about the premiere of Survivor 33. And the 90-minute premiere, first episode, meeting all of those contestants that we had snap judgments about. So, what did you think?
It was fine. I mean, I'm not unhappy with it, but it wasn't like the most groundbreaking first episode of a Survivor season. It was just pretty standard, a couple of teams.
Well, it was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was groundbreaking, at least in the sense that we finally have an official definition of the ages for millennials and Gen X, apparently.
Official by them, yeah.
Well, yeah. Who better to dictate these things than Jeff Probst?
Yes.
I would trust his say-so over any other internet resource I could think of. And so, in any case, in the opening of this episode, he declares that millennials are aged 18 to 31, having been born from the years 1984 to 1997.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gen X is ages 33 to 52, having been born in 1963 through 1982. So we have just like a lost year in there.
Yeah.
Those people get to be nothing. Sucks to be you, 32-year-olds. We don't have to give them a hard time. They have enough problems. So I'm glad that we had our pre-show because I was able to get most of my bitching about the generational labels off my chest, get it out of my system, so I don't have to worry too much about it anymore.
Good.
Obviously lots of people still are, talking about it. But it didn't bother me as much. Kind of, like I said, I got the complaining out of my system. One thing I will say is that, boy, Zeke did not disappoint just right off the bat. Starting off with his, him being on the millennial tribe, but him being the one to say, oh, all of these devices and all the internet and Twitter is basically the worst thing on it. I'm on it, but it's the worst. Just the self-aware hypocrisy of that was delightful.
Yes, I did enjoy him, as we were hoping. So
it was interesting with Zeke. I had kind of I'm sure we'll get to it, but I had a lower point with him sort of midway through the episode where I was like, I'm not sure I like this, but then he came around again.
Yes, yeah, we can talk through it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, after lots of nonsense about the generations and old people are out of touch, young people don't work hard, blah, blah, blah. The boats are coming up to the beach. Everyone still has their street clothes on. Everyone's together. And they hand out the buffs by name. And I thought for sure for a second they were going to make the two tribes look at each other and guess what the theme was. But thankfully we were spared that.
I thought for a second that they actually were like random and they were just going to be intermixed with each other just for a split second. And then I realized what had happened. So I was like, whoa, that kind of throws a whole wrinkle in the entire thing.
Yeah. So we do get some highlighting on the youngest contestant, which was Will, the high school student at 18. Who says he left high school to do this, and we're assuming he doesn't mean he dropped out. He has been pulled out with parents' permission and would presumably return afterwards.
the assumption that we're working under, but yeah,
Yeah.
I never know.
I would imagine CBS would want something like that in place to not be in dicey legal territory for contributing to the delinquency of a minor or whatever. Although I guess he's 18, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, he
can do whatever he wants. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but yeah, it's complicated. Anyway, I don't know if it's actually complicated. Maybe it's just complicated in cartoons or stories. I don't know. Never mind. I don't know what I was talking about. Paul is the oldest at I think they said 52. I got caught up and distracted by what years they were talking about for a little bit at this point. But Paul gets the prize for being the first participant to mention the participant trophy thing.
Yes. And he does it several times.
Yeah. Kind of goes on and on about it.
Yeah, it's like a big deal for him.
Yeah. And then Cece kind of jumps in too. She's not going to let people spout any cliches without her participation. Although, I don't want to be too hard on her or Paul or any of the people that are doing this, because like I said, I can roll my eyes at the producers for choosing this theme, but once the people are on there, if they want their TV time, they're going to say the right things. So,
yeah, I mean, that's what they themed the show as. So, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I don't blame any of the actual people for leaning into that stuff, especially at the beginning here. So I liked that, they Paul and Cece set it up as the young people don't work hard, and I liked Adam being kind of understated but not impressed by just kind of saying, well, let's see who wins the immunity challenge.
Yep.
I thought that was just the exact right answer. Let's not argue about it. Let's just see.
Yep.
I kind of they set it up like this immediate thing, getting the supplies, like it was gonna be a challenge, but then it kind of just wasn't really. Like there was time, they were making choices, there was timing involved, but they're not really competing.
No, I mean it's just an iteration of something we see frequently.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, like when they have to grab stuff and get off the boat or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. I can't help but wonder if that would have been the plan here, but because the weather was rough, they decided not to do it at sea.
The weather started getting rough. The tiny ship was tossed.
It was. I liked the element of choices, although I can't help but think that the cooking pots versus the hammer seemed kind of unbalanced. Like if it was a hammer and some other tools, but just a hammer compared to a set of cooking pots and utensils.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Pay as much attention to that as you obviously did. So.
Well, it caught my eye, and I was interested.
Yeah, I'm not being critical of you. I'm just saying, like, I just didn't even like register with me. That wasn't something I took notes on. So.
Well, because they made a bigger deal of the other choice because the tribes actually picked different things. They both picked the cooking supplies versus the hammer, but Gen X picked the fishing gear and the millennials picked the chickens. What do you think?
They tried to make it sound like that was like a generational thing. Like, Gen X knows to plan for the future and millennials want the immediate gratification. Yeah.
Sure. So just strategically speaking, what did you think of that choice? Like what would you pick if you got to make the decision?
Just me personally, like just on my own.
You're standing there in front of the table. Yeah.
I mean, I would take the fishing gear, but I don't see a problem with the chickens because they do lay eggs. They do, and they are sustainable as well. It's not like they're just like a one-time eating thing. Mm-hmm. So I would respect if someone wanted to take the chickens that was on my tribe. I wouldn't argue. But if I personally had to make the decision, the fishing gear would be it. just because I think it also gives you more to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
even if the nutritional value is the same, the idea that you actually get to go fishing and like do something with your
Mm-hmm.
day other than just staring at chickens, there's a value to that for me.
Yeah.
That's why I choose that.
Well, and kind of gives you agency, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
you know, obviously you can't perfectly control fishing, but you certainly can decide how hard you work at it. Whereas, you know, if the chickens are not laying enough eggs for you, really can't, there's not a lot you can do about it.
Correct. Yeah. Also agreed. Yep. That I think that was part of what was going on in my
Mm-hmm.
psyche with that. So yeah, that's why I go with that.
Yeah, that's kind of what my gut was telling me too. Maybe though it's just because,
We're Gen X.
well, yeah, sure, why not? I don't know. I feel like I understand the fishing gear better than the chickens in terms of like what it would mean to have it. Like I know that they often get chickens, but it's like, okay, well, how many eggs do you get per chicken at what rate? Like how much food is that really? And, you know, one chicken split amongst however many people, depending on when you eat it. I mean, I'm sure it's great compared to what they are normally eating on a given day, but then you also stop getting eggs from that chicken. So it kind of just like, I don't know how much that is. And while you wouldn't necessarily know for sure how much fish you get either, again, it's a little bit like I understand what it takes to get more fish with the fishing gear, but I don't
Right.
know
You
how
just
much.
fish more.
Yeah.
If you want more eggs, you can't egg more.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Oh.
yeah. We got the Jen Corgi versus the Millen dog across the street. Um, Luna, come on. Shh. Okay, so we got all of the supplies, and then we started just right off the bat with the warning about the bad weather. And I was so relieved because it meant that the thing that we knew about in terms of the evacuation was going to happen soon, not like way into the season. I feel like if it's going to happen, it's best to have it happen now.
Exactly. It was fairly anticlimactic, but
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
It was pretty cool, especially just certainly as they're actually leaving, you see how bad the weather is, and you're going like, oh yeah, okay. This is not just going easy on the contestants. That's serious. And then of course it was driven home by the having a great big tree crush one of the shelters. Can you imagine if the people had been in there?
We would have died. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have had people hurt for sure, possibly killed by that. So yeah, I think they made the right call.
Yeah, the only thing that I wish they had just dove into it a little bit more and like showed us what the accommodations looked like.
Mm-hmm. So
and I know that kind of breaks the fourth wall a little bit, but you know, and you know, in a way,
yeah,
it's not exactly that.
Well, it leaves it as an unanswered question if they don't show us, right?
Right.
Now, as far as answering that question, Jeff Probst has said in an interview that I read that they were taken to a shelter at the the production base camp. Each tribe had its own room, and the room was bare. So like they weren't staying in like hotel rooms with beds and water and stuff like that. It was, like a unfurnished room.
Right.
And they were asked, given that they weren't going to have cameras on them, they were asked to not engage in gameplay. And so there were producers there, but they weren't being filmed there. And so he said that they were a good sport and understood the special circumstances and basically refrained from talking with each other too much so as to not have significant events happen that would influence the game that we don't get to see. But, it is a valid question, though, the idea of should they maybe have tried to film them in those circumstances? Would it have been more interesting to see that, because we want to know, but then it's also like, do we really want that peek behind the Survivor production curtain?
Right. I kind of did, but you know, I get the
yeah.
But yeah.
So let's see. We that was actually, the actual evacuation was a little bit later. We got the weather warning, but then we also got a little bit of time with each tribe at the camp. So the millennials started off by having everybody introduce themselves in a circle. You know, sure, why not? That's a very reasonable first thing to do. It doesn't seem like a millennial thing at all to me. It is a, hey, we're going to be spending a lot of time together. Should we maybe learn each other's names?
Yeah, and something about ourselves.
Yeah. So it's interesting. One of the first things that we get from their tribe is Taylor and Jay connecting, because they can tell that each other they're just bros, and that's a compliment, presumably.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I guess from one bro to another, sure. What was funny, though, is there's the bit with Taylor talking about hitting it off with Figgy, and yet the thing that they intercut that with struck me as him saying something kind of douchey to her, and her not being impressed with it, kind of looking at him like. So that was a weird thing to include, especially since later she apparently does decide she is interested. So that was kind of a weird selection to choose, because it didn't read to me as them actually having a good relationship, or good foundation anyway. Because it was basically like she just makes some comment about what they're doing, and he's like sort of sarcastically saying, "Oh, you're so smart." I'm like, what? What is that?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I wasn't sure if he like meant like you're actually smart, or if he was condescending. Like, it was really hard to kind of tell.
Yeah, like, and I think that was her reaction too, which was like, I don't understand what you're saying, because either you're being an asshole and you're being sarcastic, but you don't seem to be acting like that's what you think you're doing. But it also doesn't read as completely sincere.
Right.
But so in any case, Taylor confesses to the camera of being a sucker for pretty girls. He also likes Michelle.
Yep.
Because she's also pretty. And
man. They just like pretty girls.
Sure, why not? And other guys that they can be bros with.
Yep.
And meanwhile, feeling a little bit more not fitting in, we have Zeke, who starts off here kind of is still continuing to win me over, saying, you know, he's dressed like he should be at the Miami singles bar or something, and he's an 80-year-old man at heart. But then he kind of gets a little judgmental about all the rest of his tribe mates not knowing how to do anything, and I'm like, we're not really seeing any evidence of that. We're seeing lots of clips of them working hard. Yeah. I mean, later they go swimming instead of finishing their shelter, but so that was the point where I was kind of watching him and saying, they're kind of judgmental here. I'm not sure I like this.
Yeah.
So that seems like it was at least an anomaly, but it also speaks that he might be maybe a little volatile. You know what I mean? Like, he certainly has this self-deprecating humor, but maybe the needle swings a little volatile, and sometimes it turns outward as well.
Yep.
Anyway, we'll see. Over at the Gen X camp, this was all between the lines, but okay. I guess maybe I'll first just see how you read it. So that whole first scene with them, and it was mostly Paul and Ken that talked in that first scene at the Gen X camp. What did you make of those two?
I mean, I think I sort of mentioned this earlier when we were talking about. I think it was Paul that originally was like the one talking about the participation trophies.
He's the oldest guy, the big guy.
Yeah, the two of them just really seemed to buy in to the Gen X thing, and it felt to me like the very exact editing opposite of the two bros. You know, it's like, let's find the thing that like fits our narrative like the most perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So on the Millennial Tribe, it was the two guys like, hey, we're bros, like let's be bros together. And on the Gen X, it was the sort of like, hey, like we're super hard workers and we're going to work really hard, and those millennials don't know what they're getting into. Like, I know they weren't using those words, but that was the impression I was left with, was like, okay, they've managed to find the stereotypes for both, and that's how they're opening the show. That's how I felt.
Well, sure. And so that's why I wanted to ask you first, I guess, because I felt like I was picking up on something, but it was so subtle that I wasn't 100% sure that it wasn't just a faulty detector on my part. But it seemed like what happened in that conversation is that Paul starts out kind of calling everybody together, sort of trying to be the first to talk sort of situation. And he digs deeper into that whole, we're going to do great. Can't believe, our luck, because the odds are in our favor because we're all going to work hard and everything. But then Ken kind of just, in a very soft-spoken but confident tone, kind of just slides in and cuts Paul's feet out from under him, like in a friendly way, not confrontational at all. But basically saying, well, but we don't want to underestimate them because, they can think hard too. So we're going to have to make sure we don't underestimate them. And it felt to me like there's nothing aggressive or malicious about it. But what the dynamic felt to me like, Paul's stepping up, basically trying to go ahead and take command. And then Ken kind of comes in and undercuts his point in a friendly, supportive way, in a way that's sort of like, I think I'm going to be in charge. I'm not going to make a big deal about it, but let's just not argue about it. And it's done. And that's what it felt like to me. Now, that doesn't mean everybody else is on board, but that's what the dynamic between those two seemed to be. And at first I thought that because Paul kind of reacts to what Ken is saying, like he recognizes what you're saying is kind of undercutting the point that I was trying to make. I was trying to pump everybody up by saying, this is going to be great. We know how to work hard. And then you're sliding in with this, we don't want to underestimate them.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't catch that, but I also, because we wasn't there. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think let's keep an eye on that, because like I said, it felt really subtle at the time that I really just kind of, like, I even wrote the word subtle in parentheses by my note because I wasn't sure. But at the same time, this was my first sort of taking notice of Ken, who, there's something about him, and this is a compliment to him. He's very soft-spoken and kind of low-key about it, but he's just got this real, like, sort of almost unshakable confidence about him without the normally accompanying bravado. Right. Like, he's just so confident that he knows what he's talking about that it really just doesn't even worry him that he might need to prove it to anybody.
Yeah, okay.
So, again, this was kind of like my subconscious poking at me when I'm watching him, but I felt like I saw a couple more instances like that from Ken. So let's keep an eye on that and see if I'm, if I'm picking up on something real or if I've just thought that Ken was better looking than than Paul. We didn't mention during the supply thing that Jessica, the Gen X Jessica, found a thing. It was an envelope, and it turns out it's a legacy advantage, which I love. I love this idea. Probst has confirmed in the interview that when the talk of willing it to someone is done privately. So unless, someone who owns it decides to tell everybody else, it's quite possible that only the person who has it will know about it right up until when it gets used.
Nice. Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm. I think it's awesome because it just builds the suspense, but the risk that it runs is like, what could it be that would feel worthwhile after all the buildup and yet not just destroy the fairness of the game?
Right.
Because day 36, that's going to be like Final 4, Final 3 territory.
Mm-hmm.
Could imagine it being like you get a full meal and a good night's sleep or something before the final challenge, but I don't know.
Maybe, or one of those they've done it before where you can have an advantage in the final challenge where you get to start like a little bit ahead, like however it's set up.
Mm-hmm.
You
feel like they usually do that in the second to last challenge.
Yeah, and that may be where this falls. Like it may come like right to. It may just be that, just in a different format.
Right.
Like you get a head start, or you get an extra, whatever, extra blocks in your pile, or whatever it ends up being. I feel like that's what it's probably going to be because they've used that and it's been effective. It's just a way to sort of have it like run subversely through the season that I kind of dig. So
I think it's a cool idea, but I guess I'm just sort of, the immediate question that comes to mind is, well, what is it going to be? But then I sort of like the second question that comes to mind is like, I hope whatever it is worthwhile because we're going to be spending the whole season wondering what it is.
Yeah.
True. I think I just snorted into the microphone there. So back over at the Millennial Tribe, we have Figgy is a flirty girl and says she's good at manipulating men, but then she says, maybe I'll get the $1 million check and I'll get a husband, which obviously she's joking, but I just found the whole thing really distasteful. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't want to hold it against her in any sort of permanent way, but I was not impressed by that.
I didn't. I mean, I could take it or leave it. It didn't affect me.
I mean, I'm sure she was joking. I guess I just sort of like, I don't know. I don't like reality show relationships that are formed on the show. Maybe. I don't know. But so in any case, we start nickname patrol here because we've got Justin who goes by Jay and Jessica who goes by Figgy, and now Taylor's going to be Tails, and they form the Triforce. They also decide that Michelle should be Namaste, apparently completely outside of her involvement.
Yeah, because she's like into yoga or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Michelle, incidentally, for anyone who's still having trouble learning the names, which is reasonable, there's 20 people and we've only had 90 minutes so far to talk about them. She is the religious worker, the like missionary worker girl.
Missionary recruiter.
Yeah. So in any case, they are forming a quick trio which is good, except that they are apparently kind of too into themselves and too delighted with each other to sort of keep their eye on the rest of the game, because certainly other people at camp are kind of noticing them. And so Hannah, in fact, says she's nervous about all the pretty faces of Kappa Kappa Survivor.
Yes.
Which was pretty great. So the pretty people seems like it gets subdivided as this Triforce, but then also Michelle, who seems to be part of that group more by the assumption of everybody else than by the original three. Like, they like Michelle, but it seems like we don't see her strategizing with them.
Right.
It's interesting, though, that Hannah does make an effort to connect with Michelle, though, even given that nervousness. Maybe it was part of just like not wanting there to be any group that she doesn't have at least some in with. But there was also just kind of an interesting dynamic with her she said she's Jewish. I don't remember if she was observant or not, but she seemed just fascinated with Michelle's Christianity. And in fact, there's a deleted scene on the website where you can watch where she basically Michelle offers to pray with her for wisdom when she's saying she's nervous about the game. And Hannah reacts to this like she's being shown a magic trick. She's like just delighted to find out, how do you pray? This is so interesting. And it seemed sincere, but it was just kind of weird. I don't know. She's just kind of, she's not used to that particular style of religious observance, I guess. Either that or it's kind of she's just like that about everything, which is also possible. Meanwhile, over at the Gen X camp, we get our first introduction to Rachel through commentary from Sunday. What was your read of Rachel? She's the one that got voted out.
Oh, yeah. She was annoying, but not by any fault of her own. Just her natural personality just didn't kind of gel with what was going on and what I want to see. And so she wasn't a bad person. She just, she was kind of annoying TV.
Yeah. Well, she had kind of a strange demeanor. It's hard to put your finger on, or at least it was hard for me, because she's like cheerful.
She felt,
but also there's kind of a weird like intensity under it.
Yeah.
Like not like she doesn't mean it, not like it's faked exactly, but like it's just really important to her to be cheerful all the time.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it did feel false. Like there was a false note to her.
Mm-hmm.
That I think what bothered me the most about her, and why I was fine to see her go.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't engage me.
Yeah, there might have been like a layer of anxiety under it that was causing that impression. Maybe. Like she's trying to put a happy face on it, but I agree the effect ultimately is kind of unsettling and a little off-putting, and I don't blame everybody else for kind of reacting that way too. What Sunday says about her is that she is overeager and a little bossy. I don't feel like we really saw her being bossy so much, but all that kind of just combined with the whole challenge performance, which we'll get into later, and that's kind of what sealed it up for her, I think. So this is where we start getting more stuff from David, who, what's your read on David?
He needs to chill the fuck out if he wants to stick in the game.
Yeah.
Like his anxiety, he's not. He's just not long for the game if he keeps that up. He survived this one because they thought he might have an idol. They challenged him on it, clearly. And what's her name? I thought she did a great job. It comes up later. The way that she challenged him on the idol and was like, "Oh, well, if you had an idol, I was going to offer you a deal."
Oh, I think that's the older Jessica, the Gen X Jessica.
Yeah, the older Jessica, who got the eye infections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was phenomenal. Like, oh, that's too bad. If you had that idol, I was going to give you a deal. And it's like, yeah, well, I wish I had it.
Yeah.
It was like, what a great way to probe that. I think that, honestly, like her probing of that to realize that he didn't save him this time, but he does need to chill. He needs to chill.
Yeah.
He's wound a little bit too tight for the game. Doesn't seem like a bad guy. Like, he's smart. He understands what's going on. Like, he even self-acknowledged his own flaws.
Yeah.
Now he just needs to go actually execute fixing that. And if he does, then he'll be fine. If he doesn't, then it'll be quick for him.
Yeah. I found all of his various eccentricities pretty endearing on a personal level. But I agree 100%. It doesn't make him a good Survivor player by any stretch. So I feel like I like him. I would like to see him stick around, but he is his own, like he says it himself, he's his own worst enemy in the game at this point.
Yeah.
The only reason that anything has ever, been a worry for him is because it's all self-inflicted. Because he's so quick. Like, it's one thing to be realistic and acknowledge your flaws. It's another thing to go on and on about them all the time, whether people asked you or not.
True.
So I like him. I especially liked this whole string where he's kind of saying, I don't like sleeping outside. I don't like the sun. I don't like the ocean. I don't like the bugs. It's all terrible. But I love the gameplay.
Yeah.
I thought that was fun. And at the same time that, he's so hard on himself about being afraid of everything, he is here or, on the show, right? He made it there. He's there. That takes putting yourself out there. He seems smart enough to not underestimate how difficult the game is going to be. So, it's, I think, admirable and worth acknowledgement that someone with his level of anxiety is nonetheless putting himself out there. But yes, he does need to chill out. My next note here is just Brett unimpressed with David's testosterone level. So we have David kind of hanging out with Brett and Chris here, and suddenly getting paranoid that Ken and Paul found the idol because he sees Ken holding something and doesn't immediately know what it is. We're pretty sure it's not the idol because if it was, we would have been shown something about it. So he's kind of just freaking out. It seems like Brett and Chris they would like to have him along, but they're concerned that he is a loose cannon.
Yes. That was also the take that I took from that.
Back at the Millennial Camp, all of this is still actually before the evacuation. It's fun. We started talking about the evacuation right off the bat, but there was significant stuff here before, because we have Adam concerned that the shelter's only half done, but everybody wants to go swimming. They actually stay in the water until it's dark enough that the camera has to switch to night vision, and they've still only got the shelter half built, and what's there is kind of shoddy.
Yeah.
That's not great.
That's the millennials, though.
Well, what's interesting is, despite the fact that they have an awful night, they really seem like they double down the second day. because what they managed to get built, the base of the shelter that they build before they get evacuated the next day, is still there when they come back. Like it was sturdy. And they were able to, continue building on that same frame. So it seemed like they were underestimating the difficulty the first day, but then sort of doubled down. But yeah, just the fact that they're literally, it's getting dark, it's already raining, they're trying to put a roof on it, and then their floor collapses. It's like, oh, I can only just imagine how awful that would have all been. The Gen X tribe seemed to do marginally better. I mean, they talk in some of the same words about being dissatisfied with how far along their shelter was and that it was a long night with bad weather. But when we see their shelter, it looks substantially better than...
Substantially better, yep.
But then this is where everybody gets the temporary tarp, which is already kind of notable. But but then we just roll right into the evacuation stuff, which we've kind of already talked about. I will go ahead and like normally I think the Survivor producers are fantastic at editing the show. I will go ahead and give them a note that I don't think we needed 2 separate scenes of Probst explaining the evacuation to each team.
Yeah.
I don't think we needed the whole thing twice. I mean, it's not a big deal. It was only maybe 30 seconds of the show, but just it was 30 seconds that we got to watch twice.
Yep. Identically. Yep.
Yeah. I will observe that I laughed out loud just before he showed up to the Gen X camp, because they're sitting there in their mostly built shelter looking up at the roof, and Cece kind of observes, did we build the roof facing the wrong way? I think the wind's going to just come right in here. And I was thinking, that seems like something you would want to figure out in advance.
Yep.
But in any case, we get the evacuation. They're allowed to bring only their personal items and the chickens because they don't want the chickens to die. But apparently they had to leave everything else. And I was just relieved that we get this out of the way, because it's better to get it out of the way like before even there's been a challenge, because that way there's no concern, or substantially less, that there's any unfairness about it. But yeah, boy, that tree falling on the shelter. Wow. I bet you, I don't know if like who was the one that officially made the call that they needed to evacuate, but I bet you that it, like maybe everyone was on board because it was serious, but whoever had to make that call probably stressed about it. But then they had that video clip of that tree crushing the shelter. It's like, yep, I made the right call.
Yeah. Good call. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we get more here from David's paranoia. And see, here's another nice moment from Ken, is that as David is talking there about being scared of everything, and he apparently goes around and has this conversation with every single other person on the tribe about how he's scared about everything. He's afraid of dying. And Cece is trying to like, what, like in a plane crash? And he's like, no, just dying. But then Ken walks up with this walking stick bug on his arm and says, hey, you want to try new things? Look at this. He's just got this big giant bug on his arm.
Yep.
But it was just this cool thing of, like I said, it's like there's this confidence about it, but also like he's reaching out, It's like, hey, I see where you're coming from. You've got some anxiety, but you're putting yourself out here to try new things, so try this. And there's just kind of a cool energy about it. And yeah, I don't know. It was kind of would be cool to kind of play around. That was a cool looking bug. I mean, I knew that I've seen that kind of bug before, but So let's see. This is where David goes searching for the idol and attracts everybody's attention to him. Then this is also where we got Zeke making the turnaround from the little bit of a speed bump earlier, where he just shows up and is like, leadership of the new shelter just kind of fell to me, and it actually kind of turned out great. So feeling good about that.
Yep.
That's exciting. And there was just a real fun and energy in that whole sequence. And they get fire without the flint. They build a nice new shelter. Seems like some serious tribe momentum there.
Yep. Which carried into the challenge a little bit.
Yeah. So I was really happy for him in that moment. He just, he seemed so proud of himself, and that was just great.
Yes.
This is actually where we got the Triforce conversation, and I want to find I hope that the Triforce stays together long enough for it to really be a thing. I want them to keep calling themselves the Triforce. I want Triforce to get tied into other stuff like Spies R Us did.
Hashtag.
Yeah. So I was also we get Hannah talking to Mari about the idea of there's the popular group, the cool kids versus the freaks and geeks, and I couldn't help thinking, this popular group that you're kind of worrying about, isn't it 3 people out of 10?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why you're so worried, but yeah.
Didn't somebody point that out?
I don't remember. If they did, maybe. I don't remember though. But so they kind of lump Michelle in there, and so it's 4. And so I guess it's reasonable to say that if you've got a group of 4 versus 6 people who are kind of all unaligned, you sort of want to take control of that. So the core of 4 doesn't become a larger group.
Right.
So it's worth being proactive, I suppose. I guess it's just all a perspective. How worried should you be? So this is when we get to the challenge. And I'm reminded when Probst comments on it that they had to bring their tarps back, and I'm trying to remember, did it say what the penalty would have been if they had forgotten to bring back the tarp?
It did not, but I think it was just sort of you need to do this kind of thing.
Yeah. The producers will remind you if you forget, or if you forget. Yeah. I like the new immunity idol. It's just kind of a nice, simple carved wooden tiki thing.
Yep.
And I like the challenge too. The idea of the obstacle shortcuts versus the puzzle length.
Mm-hmm.
Like with the choice earlier, what do you think your position would have been if you're your tribe captain and they're saying, what should we do, Mike? Should we take the shortcuts?
I mean, I would probably take, just because of the way the challenges are designed, they're designed to neutralize you at the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make the puzzle as easy as possible, because that's where like the rest of it's meant to like get you there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I take the puzzle.
Yeah. So meaning you don't take the shortcuts in order to have an easier puzzle.
Right. Yeah. My choice is to have an easier puzzle.
I definitely agree, because I think we see so often that what happens is that one tribe will have a substantial lead going into the puzzle, but then the puzzle just takes so long that the whatever small amount of difference or lead they had kind of becomes meaningless if they're just having trouble with the puzzle and the other tribe's doing well. So I tend to agree. Although this was another thing that Probst commented on in that same interview, which was just to say that in terms of how much harder they made the puzzle for each shortcut, that they kind of tried to balance that based on actually evening the time out. But
Still doesn't work. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is too that you could potentially talk about the differences in the tribes, like bigger bodies on the Gen X tribe would have a harder time going through the rope maze than smaller, lighter, younger people, maybe.
Yeah, and they made the case for that, but ultimately we saw which one won.
That's certainly true. The millennials got to the puzzle later and finished sooner. I liked it though. Just, it had some interesting visual bits. I like the rope mazes. I just think that's a fun obstacle. And then I liked the introduction of the shortcut element to it.
Yep. Yeah, especially like the balance beam and stuff where they could make it like larger. That was all pretty fun.
Interesting that it turned out to be a little harder to chop through that mask to take the shortcut than I think they estimated at first. Because I don't remember who it was that tried to chop the first one, but for the Gen X tribe, but she kind of whacked it 3 or 4 times and then was kind of looking at it like, oh, shoot, I thought this was just going to go right through. No, it's an actual solid wooden thing that I really have to break with this club. So the only other real significant element I think worth commenting on in the challenge is just, of course, we started with Rachel and David on the puzzle, having apparently during the strategy session volunteered as being good at puzzles. And that just reminds me, I think that there should be a new, not a rule, but a guideline for starter survivor players. There is zero value ever in volunteering as being good at puzzles. Now, that does not mean that you refuse to accept it or that you might even put yourself forward in a more, ambivalent way. Like, it's one thing if you think you're going to be good and you think it should be you can volunteer, but don't say, I should be on puzzles because I'm good at puzzles. That's a zero-win scenario. Because the only place you can go from there is you're just waiting to let everybody down when something doesn't go perfectly.
Yep.
The first time you don't do a puzzle great, then everyone's like, you said. Whereas if you volunteer and kind of like, well, I could do the puzzle. I like puzzles.
Yeah.
But not I should definitely
give it a shot.
Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes people jump to that because they're just more intimidated by the physical portions.
Right.
And I can understand that impulse. But just from a strategic perspective, whatever potential gain you could get is very, very small compared to the huge potential downside of putting yourself out there and then being terrible. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It's just a matter of presentation. So millennials win the first challenge, and everyone's pretty sure that it's going to be David or Rachel to go, which was interesting just in how all that's presented, just given how the actual votes turned out, because all those votes for Cece kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah. It turned out David wasn't really as in danger as he thought.
Either that, or it's possible
when he had that conversation with Jessica.
Yeah. Jessica, yeah. Well,
the idol thing, I think, was what had everybody tripped up.
Yeah.
And then she challenged him in a very, very great way, with which we talked about earlier, with the whole, I was going to give you a deal. Well, I don't have the idol, so I can't give you a deal. And I think that diffused a lot of, because all of their problem with him was their paranoia of him being paranoid, searching for that. So once she used a very sly trick to realize he had no idol, he came off the table because they still liked him, and they just, they wanted him for challenges and stuff like that, and Rachel was useless and kind of annoying. So I think that solidified it the other way.
Yeah, I see. My gut was kind of telling me that it was leaning more to him, and the reason we didn't hear talk about Cece was because it was going to be split between Rachel and David, but then they called an audible at the council. But at the same time, just given what we know about past seasons, which is that they've almost always got their mind made up going into tribal council, even if it seems like they don't. That you might well be correct, and it's just an editing fake out.
Yep, that's what it felt like.
Mm-hmm. So we had. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say. I mean, I don't even really remember. Like, I mean, maybe you have something to talk about there, but I felt like that was kind of the extent of the last piece of it. Just sort of felt like trying to feel David out. Once they figured out he wasn't holding an idol, it was just boop. It just all flipped to the Rachel Cece thing, and that was sort of the end of it. But yeah. There's more you want to.
No, I think you're probably right. So we definitely had both David and Rachel aware that they were potentially in trouble, and both kind of approaching people. But David had this, sort of like this nervous energy to him, but also just this. He just has this whole demeanor where you sort of. You kind of trust him because you get the feeling that like he can't not say things, which is not necessarily a great quality in a Survivor player, but it does make you perhaps reconsider whether he is lying to you about having an idol.
Yep.
Because he kind of just says everything that he's thinking, it seems like. Whereas Rachel, I think you're right that like, whether it is false or not, some of her demeanor comes across as false. So it may just be that when she's trying to reach out to people, people are just kind of not responsive. They want to kind of keep her at arm's length.
Yep.
So we get to tribal council. We see Jessica's eye infection, and I just couldn't help but feel for her there because that looks like it's just awful. And if I just dealing with that during like Survivor or something just seems like no fun. And I hope it doesn't interfere with her game too much because she seems good so far.
Yeah, they made it seem like it wasn't a big deal. Like it was just like, right. Oh, I have this infection.
Annoying, but not necessarily.
Right.
Yeah. So we had such a great moment though, where Probst had asked a couple of other people questions, and then he goes, David, and David just kind of goes, oh crap, which is just like, and of course Probst is going to comment on it because of course he would, because that's amazing.
Why would he not? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, like this is where I actually had in my notes just the idea that like I find David endearing, but that doesn't mean he's a good Survivor player. And that means that it's not necessarily in the rest of his tribe's best interest to keep him around, even if they like him. Although certainly early in the game, you're not usually voting people out for that reason. It's usually right. Social in the first ones. Because he has got an interesting energy to him, because we've certainly seen people rub people the wrong way through playing too hard or being paranoid before, but he doesn't seem to be off-putting to people in quite the same way that most of those players are.
No.
Maybe he just seems harmless.
He does, yeah. He just seems like extra like nervous and panicky. So.
Well, he's clearly smart too, so maybe there's that element of it. Like he feels like he's not a threat, but maybe you could bounce strategy off of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I loved that everybody chimes in with the whole he's scared of everything. thing, because it just sort of reinforcing this idea that he just went around and had that conversation with everybody in the tribe. Like, here's what you should know about me. I'm scared of everything.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. Cece talks about the fear of being the first out, which is kind of an unfortunate thing for that to be the primary thing she talks about in the tribal council and then going home. But what are you going to do? So it has to be someone, right? Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. What am I talking about? Because I guess I'm just still sort of taken aback because I wasn't expecting her to get votes, and then for her to be the second place vote getter just took me off guard. I think that's
I'm still there.
Yeah, I'm still thrown by that. I said so. I said that wrong. But yeah, I think maybe what it was is just it seems like a surprise, and she seems like she wasn't taking it well, and I'm not sure where she goes from here. But hopefully she can rally and find something to do. Yes, this is where I was talking a little bit about in my notes about Rachel's, just her demeanor. It's like it's very cheery in a way, but also kind of impenetrable. Like, like you get the feeling like she acts like that all the time, sort of independent of how she really feels. So is it fake? Maybe.
Right.
It could be sincere, but you get the feeling that you can't tell because she's just always like that.
Yep.
And yeah, it kind of puts you on edge. I felt it even just watching her.
And will not know because she is gone.
That's true. So David only got one vote. And then Sunday got a vote, which, I didn't actually look up to see whose vote that was, but presumably Cece and Rachel were the Dave and the Sunday, I would guess, because they're the ones not in on what was happening.
Right.
I suppose I could look that up to confirm. But since when do we do research on this show?
Yeah, that was my understanding too. So
that we don't do research on this show.
Oh yeah. No, I always had that understanding.
Yeah. So in any case, Rachel is the first out. Her final words, she kind of did the same thing, which is that for sure we can imagine that she is sad and disappointed, but she kind of puts the brave face on it, which can be an admirable quality, but you sort of get the feeling that that's just her all the time setting, and it's hard to know what's really going on. Cece kind of goes out being concerned about having received so many votes, as she should be. And then next time, preview for next time, romance blooming between Taylor and Figgy, but Jay warns them Bauer couples can get broken up. And I wrote #Triforce Trouble.
Triforce Trouble.
Also, apparently someone has a heart attack, which is terrible.
Yeah, that was weird. I don't feel like it was a real heart attack, but we'll see,
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, if that is what happens, Paul seems like sort of the obvious candidate. I mean, he's the oldest and kind of a big guy. I mean, it's just not a guarantee, but just, if you're going to play the odds, I would say he's the favorite. I also wonder if David's little clip of like, this could be good for me. Like, I wonder if that's out of context. I feel like it's going to be out of context at least a little bit. Like, right. Even if that is what he's talking about and it's not something else entirely, I'm sure he like there's an awareness there.
Right.
It's kind of the sort of thing of like, of course you are concerned for the health and safety of your fellow contestants, but strategically, you can't not think about that in a game like this.
Right.
Yeah. So in any case, we're off to a start. I feel like it's a good start in the sense that it's, it wasn't necessarily the most groundbreaking or thrilling episode or premiere to start a season, but what I think this season does have going for it is a lot of likable people and a lot of interesting players.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
There's not really, I don't feel like there's anyone that I really don't like.
So far, no. Yeah.
Yeah. There's time for someone to turn on us, but or just someone who hasn't talked much yet. But we'll see. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am too.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to you not being so judgmental of it.
Okay. Did I do better this time?
Yes.
Good. I don't want to be so judgmental. I'll try. Okay, so I will go ahead and get this episode posted, but we should let everybody know.
That wraps it up. Yeah.
Yeah, we should let everybody know that we're going to be taking next week off and then catching up for episodes 2 and 3 the following week because something very important is happening. Do you want to tell everyone, or should I?
Yeah, you're traveling to Augusta, Georgia.
Yeah, and it's because you're getting married there.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Not to me, just in case anybody's unclear on that.
Nope. Yeah. To my fiance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will be getting married next weekend, so we will not be doing a show.
Yeah. But we will be back the following week. Or at least that's the plan.
It's the plan. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right.
Right now, the main plan is to get married.
Yes.
That's a good plan. The other stuff is sort of incidental.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, everybody, for listening and or watching. Check out the podcast notes at christianaellis.com. And that's it. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.